Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the Ericsson Showcase. We thought it would be interesting for all of you to hear some of our market insights. We'll bring you some parts of the Ericsson Mobility Report, which is just being released, so you will hear the latest news. And we will bring also some insights from the Consumer Labs report. We have today with us Patrick Serval. He is head of strategic marketing at Ericsson, and he is actually the responsible for the Ericsson Mobility Report. So who better to bring us all the information about it than him? So welcome, Patrick. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rika, and hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here and to be able to give you some insights into the Ericsson Mobility Report and the findings that we have there. The report is delivered or released twice per year, so we just released it last week, and we're having a next one in November. We've actually done this since 2011, so this is the 10th year that we actually are providing these reports, and it's based on the fact that Ericsson is in so many different countries, 180 countries, and we are measuring data in many different parts of the world, and actually are also running networks for almost 1 billion subscribers. So based on that, we get a lot of insight, and we then make use of that in our own forecast and models going forward. So let me take you into the report itself and show you some parts of it itself. Some of the key highlights this time is the fact that 5G is continue to grow at a rapid pace, actually more than we expected a year ago or a year and a half ago. Right now, the rate is 5G is adding actually 1 million subscriptions per day worldwide. Northeast Asia, North America, the Gulf countries are actually the regions that are leading right now in terms of 5G subscription uptake. But also consumption of data or monthly usage per smartphone is growing quite rapidly. We're now actually in the situation where we have the average smartphone user in the world is actually using more than 10 gigabytes per month, which I think is quite amazing given the fact that there is 6 billion smartphone users in the world, and all of them are using data in such a enormous way. But let's look into some of the details here in the report, and we'll come to the question and answer session in the end of this session. So please put your questions into the chat. Right now, we are around 8 billion mobile subscriptions in the world. We're expecting that to increase to some 8.8 billion by 2026. It's a little bit less than we said a few years ago, mainly because the number of subscriptions is not increasing as much as we thought, based on the fact that there is less number of dual devices or multiple devices. People don't have a lot of prepaid SIM cards laying around, and so there's less inactive subscriptions as well. So in that sense, number of subscriptions is growing, but it's still, around 8.8 billion, which is far more than number of people in the world. So number of users in the world right now is around 6 billion, which is also the same amount of subscriptions we have on smartphones. So the growth of smartphones is fantastic. Right now, we're actually believing that this will increase up to almost 7.5 billion smartphone subscriptions by 2026. Another big growth area is then mobile subscriptions, mobile broadband subscriptions, which is following the smartphones trend. Fixed broadband, which is on the bottom of this curve, is growing as well. And that is very much also driven by the latest development in fiber rollout, and the fact that the pandemic also has put the fixed broadband networks into spotlight and the need for that. But I will come back also to fixed wireless access, which is another area which is growing steadily. Looking then more on technology level for cellular, this is the situation we are in right now. We're actually past 220 million 5G subscriptions end of last year. We're on our way to 580 million, basically passing the 500 million mark in somewhere in November. Reaching then quite a high level already now. And 5G is actually much faster than 4G was at a similar point in time. We're actually expecting 5G subscription uptake to reach the 1 billion mark roughly 2 years ahead of when 4G did the same. This is due to a multitude of reasons, but some are the fact that we have more devices, more commercial models available earlier in the cycle. We also have China that have added on 5G much earlier than they did on 4G. That also plays a big part of that, the fact that 5G is early. But also the fact that we are, as humans, we are more used to the smartphone in itself, and easier to just change a new device and come up to 5G subscriptions, which will lead to this uptake. So we're looking at 3.5 billion 5G smartphones by 2026. Right now, over 160 operators have launched 5G, and it continues to increase. So it is very much a global standard. But we shouldn't forget that 4G, which is the green part here, is still the dominant technology, and 4G continues to grow. I would say the peak is around 2022. Around there, sometimes it will start to decline somewhat in favor of 5G then. Looking at this more on a regional level, we can see here where the different regions are in uptake of 5G, 5G being the orange here as well, and then 4G on the green part. So you see one bar here for 2020 and another bar for 2026 per region, all the way from Sub-Saharan Africa all the way up to North America. And you see they are more or less ranked based on the 5G subscription expected in 2026. So North America is expected to actually lead in terms of penetration of 5G, reaching some 84% by 2026. What you can also see that the regions, Northeast Asia, Western Europe, the Gulf countries, all of them are regions that today have a lot of 4G subscriptions, and they are the ones likely then to have also a lot of 5G subscriptions 5-6 years from now. The other regions are following suit, but it takes a little bit longer time due to availability of spectrum, availability of launched networks and coverage build out and so on. But all regions will have started. Also to note that there's big difference within each region. There are countries that are very advanced, but are in regions that are not as advanced on general level. That's also, of course, a problem when you average things in this way. But let's look a little bit further into Western Europe. Western Europe is right now basically on the way to have some 36 million 5G subscriptions end of this year. That's our forecast. We also believe that the big portion of 5G subscription will start coming in 2022, 2023, ending up at some 360 million 5G subscriptions by 2026. Most of the 4G is going to still increase a little bit and then start reducing in favor of 5G. So it will be very much a 5G market when we come to 2026. It is, of course, still a very diverse, region with a lot of different countries. Therefore, you would have both 2G and 3G technology still being there, even though the amount of users with only a 2G or only a 3G phone is going to be very limited by 2026. But if we compare the regions a little bit, we created this slide, which kind of highlights the situation we are right now. The graph here, if you can see it, is basically saying per region then the uptake of 5G. If we look at 2021 mark, right now it's actually Northeast Asia and basically China then in that region that is leading. Then we have North America and the Gulf countries. If you have been following the mobility report, you know that we haven't talked about the Gulf countries before, but we added them into the report as a region due to the big development that is happening there. They were early on 5G. They have a big penetration of smartphones and very advanced from an ICT perspective. So it made sense to have that. But looking at Western Europe, we sometimes talk about that being off a little bit to a slow start, and that I think you can see here. Compared to Northeast Asia, it's almost 1 year behind reaching the 20% mark of penetration. So it is a little bit slower uptake due to the availability of spectrum in Europe in certain countries, and that also then leads to that on an overall level, it takes a little bit longer time to get pickup. However, as device models are available, we have around 300 5G device models already announced or launched commercially. Prices are coming down. It's very likely that over time, once all the networks in Europe being more inhomogeneous in one sense than the other regions, once more networks have rolled out coverage, most users will actually, when they upgrade to a new smartphone in Europe, they will get a 5G device, and that is likely then to have a bigger effect of bringing it up. So by 2026, we believe that Western Europe is on par with other regions. North America being a little bit higher, basically due to the fact that it's more or less one market. It's 4 countries in US that are dominating, or 4 operators in US that are dominating the pickup, and that is of course then driving the usage a little bit more in North America. So looking then into what this means in other aspects of what we can see in the report, we can look at fixed wireless access. I talked about that as being an interesting area. Right now, we're seeing an uptake that goes from around 60 million connections right now, a little bit more end of this year, to grow to some 180 million connections. When it comes to fixed wireless access, we tend to talk about connections rather than subscriptions. You can probably say both things, but it's basically to denote the fact that a fixed wireless access connection or subscription is likely to be for a household or a small medium business or an enterprise. So you will have more users, more individuals connected to it. So if you take the 180 million connections in 2026 globally, that would represent some 650 million individuals at least. The drivers are very much the need for broadband connectivity. I think the pandemic last year have highlighted this. We have seen an increase of basically 20% higher uptake of fixed wireless access offerings out from telcos than what we expected a year ago. So that also talks to the fact that the pandemic have put the finger on the need for good broadband connectivity at home, given all the lockdowns that have happened. So this means that we see more and more service provider offering fixed wireless access, both on 4G and 5G. It's also clear that the 5G service providers, the ones that have launched 5G, they are also the ones that are more likely to have a fixed wireless access offering, either on 4G or 5G. So, and 5G is for sure going to be taking more of the added connections in the future, and that's what you see here. Basically, 40% of all the fixed wireless access connections in 2026 is expected to be on 5G when we get to 2026. So this is an interesting area. It does work as a very much of a complement to fiber, but also to support them. But you will also have a different consumer usage in terms of the traffic or data that is consumed over fixed wireless access compared to a smartphone. I'll come back a little bit to that. So talking about traffic, this is a graph that we have had all along. It basically denotes the amount of exabytes flowing through the mobile networks of the world on a monthly basis. You can see it per quarter. So the red bars here represent the amount of exabytes. Exabytes being a number with it's after the first stage is basically 18 zeros. So it's a huge number, and it's hard to comprehend, but we'll come back to exactly what it is per user. But what you can see more interesting maybe is the growth rate on traffic. It seems like it always goes up, and it does. I've been surprised many times that traffic is increasing. It's very much driven by the fact that all the video applications are driving so much traffic in smartphone. We love to stream as humans different video services. The year-over-year growth rate here is the line that you can see with some bumps on it, but the overall trend is slowly going down, which is expected. There is, very little things in the world, I would say, that have a constant uptake of a 50% growth rate year over year over year over year. So we expect it to come down a little bit more because of going from where we are. But just to highlight how different things can impact growth rate. The first bump here on the growth rate that happened in 2015, this was when T-Mobile in the US offered a binge-on service, basically unlimited video services for certain video streams, YouTube and others. And the other operators in the US followed suit and offered similar services, and the traffic really increased a lot during that time, impacted the growth rate on global level. The next bump, this is India. This is Reliance Jio. That was a disruptor coming into the market, offering 4G at a very good price, even for free for a certain period of time. And they quickly attracted 100 million 4G users in the India network, and growth rate went up enormously in terms of traffic there. And the last bump, which is really high, this is when I told you 4G came a little bit later in China, probably 4 years or something like that, than in the rest of the world. But once the network were up and launched and ready and built out in China, then there was also a higher competition, almost a price war in terms of offering high data rates and high data buckets for users. And the Chinese growth rate in terms of traffic went up a lot. So that's where we saw on a global level numbers around almost up to 80% per year growth in traffic. Now it's coming down. I would expect that it probably goes down to some 20-30% going forward. Still, looking ahead, the growth rate is expected to mean that we are, from where we are today, will grow up to 26 with a factor of 5. That means basically that there will be 5 times more traffic overall in the world by 2026. But this is overall in terms of averages. So we have to come back to talk about peak. That's a different thing here. But the averages in the world, given the fact that all the networks are up and running, that is growing with a factor of 5. And the average user per smartphone is now exceeding 10 gigabytes. It is the video that drives a lot of this traffic. So you can see here on the right-hand side, the yellow part here is basically 4G mobile data. The orange part here is 5G mobile data, basically smartphone data done on 5G. That right now is more than 50% of all mobile data. That will be more than 50% in 2026 of all the mobile data. On top of that, we have fixed wireless access. As I said, there was around 180 million connections expected in 2026. That's a very small number of connections compared to the 6 billion or even higher, or 7 billion smartphone users that we will have in 2026. Still, the traffic from fixed wireless access is expected to generate some 20-25% of all traffic, or on top of what we have. And that is because the fixed wireless access users are likely to be more like fixed broadband users, more like fiber people that have a fixed broadband. Then you don't count usage in gigabytes, in tens of gigabytes. It's more of hundreds of gigabytes. Could be 2, 3, 4, 500 gigabytes, even more per month for these users. Looking at the growth rate here, we can look at the usage per smartphone, which of course is interesting to have a glimpse on. This is where you see on the black line that we passed the 10 gigabyte curve, but it is a big difference between the different regions. Right now, if you look at the end of 2020, the Gulf regions actually have the highest usage, around 18 gigabyte on average. India follows suit with almost 15, and then we have the other regions. Western Europe is right now expected to have some 11 gigabyte in average, but rising quite heavily up to 47 gigabyte per month per user in 2026. And that's still average. If you take South Korea average today in that country, they are right now today on 38 gigabyte a month on the 5G users. So you can see that even though the average goes up, that means you have a big range of different users. So what does 5G mean then in terms of improvement in performance, and what does that actually lead to? We are also together with our partners in Ericsson on Consumer Lab, where we have over 25 years done consumer research in many countries, done our biggest study ever, where we have looked at what 5G users claim and what they think they are doing. There's a huge report with a lot of different insights and so on. But it's interesting to see how they have started to actually say that they have, when they have got the 5G device and started to use 5G, they have actually decreased the usage on Wi-Fi, both at home and other locations, with a roughly 20%. So 20% of users claim they have decreased the usage. And I think this is the first time we actually see a decrease in usage on Wi-Fi. That hasn't happened before. On top of that, there is another 10% that claim that they have even stopped using Wi-Fi on smartphones, because the hassle of changing between Wi-Fi and 5G on the smartphone, they kind of stopped that, and also always have 5G on instead, even at home. And when we ask them what they do, they basically spend 2 hours more per week on cloud gaming and 1 hour more on AR apps than 4G users, which is kind of interesting, because these are also things that drives a lot of traffic. So we will see probably more traffic growth among these type of users, which will drive up the need for big capacity in networks in some parts of the world. Coverage is another important part, of course. Without coverage, you don't get the service, and the 5G coverage build out is expected to continue to increase. Right now, we have some 15% of the world's population being covered. Most of that right now has been in China. They've had enormous uptake of or rollout of 5G base stations. In 2026, we expect this to be 60%. So this will be many countries having almost nationwide coverage, but also many cities having good coverage and so on, even though there will be parts of the world that still have a little bit of lack of coverage from 5G. 4G going up to almost 95% coverage by 2026. And this is where you see 3GPP, that's basically all cellular technologies on top there, that we expect to continue to be around 95%, even though we see 2G and 3G networks are sunset in different places. That won't have any negative impact on global network coverage, because we expect 4G coverage and 5G coverage to complement and replace in those places. So I wanted to take also some minutes to talk about some deep dives that we do in the report. And we'll make sure that you can download the report. It's on Ericsson.com. There we also in every time we actually do a few articles, and we did one together with T-Mobile US, and basically written it as a collaborative article with them to try to understand their multiband 5G spectrum strategy. I thought it would be useful to show you a little bit of how they're thinking about the spectrum and what they are using. Right now, T-Mobile in the US are deploying 5G on dedicated low-band spectrum on 600 megahertz. They are also using mid-band. They are deploying that on 2.5 gigahertz. 2.5 is what they got from the Sprint merger, if you're aware of that. On top of that, there's a C-band that's being auctioned, and C-band is, of course, the more 3.5 gigahertz mid-band. And then on top of that, they also have a high band, the millimeter wave. So they are combining this, and the combination of both low and mid-band creates a significant improvement. But let me explain a little bit the graph here, because it says 5G mid-band and 4G and 5G. 4G and 5G here is basically the fact that they started rolling out 5G on low band on 600 megahertz. They don't have so much capacity there, but they have coverage there. So if you combine 4G and the 5G low band and do test, you do trial test with the performance in different cities, you get the green bars. Yes, pretty good speed still. Average downlink speed is around 100 megabits per second, up to 150. But when they added 5G midband only, the capacity is so much better on the midband, so they actually increased the speed up to 250 megabit per second, and that gives them quite a lot of more capacity and of course better service, both for mobile broadband but also for fixed wireless access and for small and medium sized businesses that they also try to attract. They expect to increase the available network capacity by a factor of 14 over the next few years. And the way they are using the band is basic combination, as I said, of the low band, the mid band, and the high band. And they really see the benefit of doing that, because if you have a low band combined with a mid band, you can actually increase the coverage area of the mid band. And same with having mid band and high band together, you can increase the coverage area substantially for the high band. The reason you can do that is because you allow then using carrier aggregation, you allow the downlink to be where if you're then streaming downlink video, you have the downlink on, for in this case, the midband. And then you have the uplink going from the phone up to the base station on the low band that has a little bit better coverage capabilities. That means that the phone, the device that have less output power and capabilities of actually less sensitivity in the antenna still can actually reach the base station on the uplink, and therefore you have actually good connection, and therefore the downlink then can be have higher capacity over the midband, and that is increasing the coverage with almost 30% in some cases. And if you look at the different capabilities then of the different bands, I think that having the understanding of using that is what T-Mobile is trying to do then, and actually address then the different services that they want to offer by using different bands. So high band they are using for targeted high-speed areas and services. That could be fixed wireless access, where they use the millimeter wave. They use the midband for coverage and capacity reasons. It is global spectrum availability. They can have the good roaming with those type of devices and have large bandwidth. And the low band is for creating even better indoor penetration or nationwide coverage with the low band. And they're expecting to reach some 90% coverage there nationwide with the low band. So looking then into just to finalize the overall presentation, as I said, this is a 36-page document or report with a lot of different graphs and data points. I won't be able to take them all, but let me just finalize with saying a few things on IoT. Cellular IoT, which is what we're trying to track here, is expected to reach some 5.4 billion in 2026. It's right now it's around, or it's gone 1.5 billion or something like that. On the right hand side you see the cellular IoT in bar chart. So lower part here is legacy, which is 2G 3G. This is more the old GPRS type of or 2G type of retail machines, so pay machines that you can find when you go to a retail shop or restaurant. Smart meters and so on 2G is very likely to be found here. The massive IoT is more narrowband IoT or CAT-M, the new technology on 4G. It started to grow quite rapidly, and we expect that to be the major part. And then broadband IoT, which is more 4G modules, almost like a smartphone, but you put that into a car and you go or to a drone or to a billboard or something like that, then you get the high speed as a smartphone, but on a device. And that's basically the broadband IoT here in that. So, but still, cellular IoT is a smaller part of all IoT. Sometimes we confuse the two, but you can also look at the short range IoT. That's where you find all the Wi-Fi devices, all the all the Bluetooth devices or Zigbee or Ethernet or other type of connections that are done for the short range. Totally, we expect around 27 billion IoT devices by 2026. So finalizing before we take some questions there, we have just released the forecast for where we're going to end up. We believe we are on the way to reach some 580 million 5G subscriptions end of this year. That means that we right now have a rate of adding 1 million 5G subscriptions worldwide every day. More than 70% of all the service providers are offering fixed wireless access services, and we see the 5G service provider, the one that have launched 5G, being on the forefront here of adopting fixed wireless access. And globally, we are on the 10 gigabyte mark. We're more than, or average user in the world is using more than 10 gigabyte per month. That is expected to reach 35 gigabyte. And when I saw that number, I realized that I'm actually on the bottom half of the world because I'm not using 10 gigabyte on a monthly basis. So that gave me a highlight of how different the world is and how much video is actually attracting usage in so many different parts of the world. So with that, I think we can start taking some questions. Erika, have you seen any coming in?
I have. Now I'm back. Hi.
There you are. Good.
Yes. First, I think thanks a lot for the very, very interesting session on insights. Really good to know the latest of our analysis and research. And I think it's also really interesting to, especially this graph that you showed with the increase of the data and seeing that we are increasing still. We are increasing by almost 50% in 1 year, the data. And the explanation of the peaks, very interesting to see. And I think that also goes quite well aligned with the things that our consumer lab colleagues have seen in relation with the decrease of Wi-Fi, when we see that unlimited packages of 5G turns into people not switching back and forth from your Wi-Fi to your 5G. And I expect that trend will keep on coming.
Yeah, definitely. And I think usage, it's sometimes difficult to just show the average numbers. And I think that when I look to one application that is actually starting to show up much more is gaming, cloud gaming, using gaming services. And if you were to stream a very fast-paced game, playing some something that happens a lot, action game or something like that, that could require as much as 25 megabits per second. If you have a user that does that 1 hour per day, that's 345 gigabyte per month. So compare that to the averages of 10 in the world right now, there will be users that actually have enormous amount of gigabytes used per month. And we see telco operators that are looking at, how do we create packages that support these gamers in a good way? And that is actually starting to happen. Yes,
the new generations.
The new generation, exactly.
Okay, I have a question regarding all the data that you have shown, and you have mentioned in one slide that this was average data, that this was not peak data. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the methodology from the Ericsson Mobility Report?
Yes, the way we do this, first of all, we do our own measurements in many countries, trying to understand what the users are right now. And of course, that leads to an understanding of the overall, or the average data that is passing through the network. And we also then follow the trends among the users, the devices, and so on. But there is a big difference, as I said, between the average and the peak. When you look at average, you basically look at how much are you spending on a monthly basis. That could be during, some users do it on nighttime, some others do it on daytime, but there are are users that are, of course, doing it in a very different. As I said, there could be up to 200 gigabyte per month for certain users. So the peak rate in a certain area could be much, much, much higher, because you can't really look at the average. And you need to look at when people are active at the same time, and that's why the capacity from especially the both mid-band and the high band comes into play. When you have that capacity, you can actually allow to build networks that can handle all that traffic at the same time. If it's a stadium where you have tens of thousands of people at the same time looking at augmented reality, you will need that capacity and even more than that.
I see also very good questions from the audience. So I think a very good timing with this question. Could you provide the latest forecast for 5G use indoor in building? That's coming from Ridley.
Yeah, interesting that you should say. This is we've actually written a whole article on indoor coverage or indoor or usage, right, in this report, and I happily promote you to read that. But what we're saying there is basically the fact that this rule of thumb that we have had before, that 70% of all the traffic is coming from indoor, may need to be or could be changed to look at it more scientifically. It may still be true in some areas, but it varies a lot. So if you look at the way we have done it, we actually have a new methodology where we are using crowdsourced data, we're using statistics from the network, and using AI to actually understand the traffic that comes, or the signals that comes to an outdoor base station. How many of these signals or sessions are actually generated from within the building, inside walls or so? And you can actually determine that in the waveform of the signal coming back to the base station. And based on that, we can actually estimate in areas how much of the traffic is coming from within buildings. I don't have an average in the world still, but in this particular network that we looked at in some urban areas, it was around 60%, 65%, I think, came from indoor. If you went out to very high-rise building area, it was actually less, 30% coming from indoor. And the reason for that being often that those buildings are harder for the signals to penetrate. So usually those users inside there don't have coverage at all, because it's these iron glass windows that are climate supportive, and the radio signals have harder time to penetrate those buildings. So you have to analyze per area, which how much traffic is coming from the different buildings, or inside or outside.
Okay, so it will become even more difficult to forecast
and that's why we can. The good thing is we can measure it, and I think that's the new thing, that we are able to do that. But we could do that per region and per area.
And now, also we live now in some interesting times that maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we wouldn't have expected ourselves to be having this kind of conferences and working so much on our phones and from home. Have you seen any trends on the change of the usage of data?
Yeah, I think what we saw a year ago when the pandemic hit, we were in the middle of actually creating the next mobility report for June last year, and I kind of stopped everything and said, okay, this is going to be big. Maybe everything will stop now, and we need to revisit it. But having looked into it then directly, it was clear that the growth rate of traffic continued. What happened though was that traffic moved location. So people that usually use their smartphones out and about and in business district started to move that usage to be in residential areas instead and at home. But most areas actually increased traffic. In some places, the fixed network took more of the traffic growth. In some networks, especially in areas where you didn't have as good fiber or broadband, fixed broadband, then the mobile network took that. Overall, the growth rate continued. And we also saw 5G subscriptions continue to pick up and actually increased. I thought also that 5G would maybe get slowed down, that operators didn't want to launch, but they did a fantastic job of continuing to serve the users and launch networks and and the pickup has happened, and therefore we have actually increased our own 5G subscription forecast during the year of pandemic. Now, if we hadn't had a pandemic, maybe it would have been even higher. I don't know, but obviously
we will never know.
We never know. We will never know, actually. True.
Okay, maybe just to finalize a little bit, also I'd like to hear a little bit of your insights of the last Ericsson Mobility report. Is there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the resilience of the users in terms of wanting to use more and more data and how video still drives traffic is for me a little bit of a surprise. We saw regions like India, Southeast Asia, that drastically increased the usage. We actually thought that, yes, they have a huge amount of data per user and thought that, maybe that would reduce, but it didn't. It continued. So one thing I know for sure is that we can never be, sure of how the future will look, but apparently it's very easy to underestimate the growth of traffic in this world. And I think that, I'm still surprised every time I see these numbers. The amount of data that flies through the network is just amazing, and that continues to grow in an amazing way. So I think that, for me, it always surprises me a little bit that we see those growth rates.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think with that, we leave everyone who is in the showcase for a couple of minutes to refill their cup of coffee, tea, water, maybe stretch their legs before the next session starts. So thank you very much for being with us, Patrick. And thank you, everyone, for joining our showcase.
Thank you, everyone.